Welcome to the Parsha Themes Shir. It's Parsha Eikev, and it is for the Refuah Shalema of Moshe, Shema ben Leah Esther Halevi. So the Parsha starts off, V'haya Eikev tishmu'un eis hamishpatim, and this shall be the reward when you listen to these instructions. The word Eikev is an unusual usage. What does it imply? Eikev can mean either heel or because or the reward. So according to Rashi, the verse refers to the mitzvos which are often trampled by the heel. In other words, those we might consider unimportant. God assures us that if we pay attention to observe even these mitzvos, then many blessings will result. The sages explain that all mitzvahs are equally important and that the Torah purposely omits mention of their individual reward in order that we shouldn't focus on some and neglect others. The Ibn Ezra and Nachmanides, the Ramban, interpret Eikev in the sense of in the end. In other words, in the heels of, or in the sense that the heel is at the extremity of the body. The reward being something that follows the action. A similar interpretation is given by Orach Chaim, who explains that true satisfaction and fulfillment comes at the end, the complete fulfillment of all the mitzvahs, and by Rabbeinu Bechaya, who sees it as an allusion to the reward that we do receive in this world is but a lonely and marginal, the heel aspect of the true worth of the mitzvahs. Now, our current age and the coming of the Mashiach. So although Eikev, the heel, may be seen as a lowly and inconsequential part of the body, the fact is the whole body rests on them, and they also propel us forward, so they are actually very important. Every soul, we learn, is included in the great soul of Adam Rishon, the first man. The earlier generations corresponded to the head of Adam, the later ones to the body, but our current generation is compared to the heel. We're like the heel because, like the lowliness of the heel, spiritual sensitivity is at its lowest in our generation. Much time has elapsed since God gave us the Torah, and every succeeding generation has seen a decline in spiritual level. Our spiritual capacity now is at the lowest level possible. Spiritually, the generation is weak, but we also have great potential. Our generation is termed Ikva de Mashiach, literally the heels of the Messiah. In other words, the final generation preceding his arrival. So actually being the heel is an awesome privilege and responsibility. In Kabbalistic terms, the heel represents Malchus, in other words, sovereignty. It reflects the need to bring his presence into even the lowest realms. Doing such will finally reveal the divine light into the world for everyone to clearly see and bask in. The sages tell us the greatest potential for redemption is at these lowest times, when truth and falsehood are inverted. When the redemption arrives, the spiritual and physical worlds will meld into one. Now, conquering the Canaanite nations and Emunah. So the Pasuk says, V'nashal HaShem, and HaShem will thrust out the nations from before you little by little. You won't conquer all of the land at once because of the danger of wild beasts roaming the land, the verse states. But couldn't God prevent the wild beasts attacking in the first place? However, Moshe knew for them to merit this, the people would all need to be tzaddikim, in other words, perfectly righteous, which was not at all realistic at the time considering the generation. If you should say in your heart, these nations are more numerous than I, how can I dispossess them? You shall not be afraid of them, the Pasuk says. When you understand that the nations are more numerous than you, and that you with your own power cannot defeat them, but are totally dependent on God's help, then you need not fear them. But if you begin to believe that you can defeat them on your own, then you indeed have great cause to fear. The verse states, remember what HaShem did to Pharaoh and the miracles he wrought for you and how he looked after you. This teaches the importance of constant awareness of God, God consciousness. Thus, fear is caused by forgetting HaShem, in other words, a lack of Emunah, or faith in God. that I cannot trust the future because I am incapable of controlling it and there is no one at all to rely on. But arrogance is also caused by forgetting HaShem and the lack of Emunah, the lack of faith. Pen tochal v'savata ubatim tovim tivneh v'rom levavacha v'shechachta es HaShem Elokecha, lest you eat and be satisfied, and you will build beautiful houses, and your heart will grow haughty, and you will forget HaShem your God, says the Pasuk. It's very tempting for a wealthy person to say, I have obtained everything I need due to my own knowledge, wisdom, expertise, or efforts. We can very easily become overconfident in our own abilities. However, next day, God may test us by radically changing the landscape of our lives, by bringing us new trials and tribulations. If we don't appreciate that it is HaShem who is in complete control, then we will react in the wrong way, potentially deepening our troubles. Thus, the mistake of hubris, arrogance, and that of fear come from exactly the same place. In other words, lack of Emunah, lack of faith. It's only when I doubt God that I fear for my situation or for the future. And it's only when I doubt God's involvement that I applaud myself for my achievements and take credit where it's not due. Arrogance leads one to falsely assume that the future will go well just like the past. But fear and anxiety is also an inappropriate reaction to the uncertainties of this world. Therefore, we need to find a proper framework for coping with a dynamic, changing world that neither causes us excessive confidence or even arrogance, but which neither leads us to excessive trepidation or fear. This is what proper Emunah provides. Now, what is HaShem really asking from us? We know we need to always and constantly be aware of HaShem, to be aware of a power greater than ourselves. But we must also remember to ask ourselves, what does HaShem truly want from me? Moshe encourages the Jewish people, V'ata Yisrael ma HaShem Elokecha shoel mi'amoch ki im leyira. And now, Israel, what is HaShem your God asking of you, other than to fear HaShem your God, to go in all his ways, and to love him, to serve HaShem your God wholeheartedly and with your whole being? The word now, as in and now Yisrael, can be understood to mean that one should always stop to consider, what is HaShem asking of me now, in this moment? This should be our religious compass and objective throughout life in all that we do. We must be able to transcend the letter of the law and the details of Jewish life to create a unified spiritual existence that is Hayosha v'hatov b'einei HaShem. In other words, what is upright and good in the eyes of HaShem at every moment, says the Chofetz Chaim. Now, realizing our potential. After Moshe shattered the first set of tablets, he pleaded with God to forgive the Jewish people. God did forgive them eventually, and instructed Moshe to prepare 2 replacement tablets upon which God would inscribe the 10 Commandments yet again. Ve'echtov al luchos. I will inscribe on the second set of tablets the words that were on the first tablets. Moshe shattered the first tablets when he saw that the Jewish people had fashioned the golden calf. These shattered tablets were kept in a special wooden box, which God instructed the Jewish army to take with them whenever they went into battle. But how could the eternal testimony that the Jews had sinned by making the golden calf have been of any help or of any merit when they were risking their lives in battle? Moshe broke the tablets when he saw the golden calf, because at that moment they became worthless. The Torah flew out of the tablets and returned to heaven, rendering them 2 lifeless stones. God himself had indeed carved them, but they were now nothing compared to what they had become when God chiseled the 10 Commandments into them. Thus, the lesson of the shattered tablets is that we should never be satisfied with our inherent worth. We should always strive to maximize our potential. The same lesson applies today. Rather than being content with past achievements, we must continuously strive to fulfill our personal potential and our divine mission, recognizing that without it we are but a lifeless, shattered stone. Now, unity of the mitzvahs. The pasuk says, "Kol ha-mitzvah asher anochi mitzavecha hayom," the entire commandment which I command you today. It's in the singular rather than the plural. One interpretation is that the blessings promised by God are contingent on Israel's acceptance of the entire Torah, as in one commandment. Picking and choosing and keeping the Torah piecemeal, most often according to what we consider important, is not what HaShem wants at all. Another interpretation is that to receive reward for a mitzvah, we must fulfill it to its completion. It is the one who completes the mitzvah who gets the credit. Similarly, all the generations of history labored to bring Moshiach, and certainly their contribution is greater than ours. Nevertheless, we are the generation of redemption, since a mitzvah is credited to the one, meaning here to the one generation, who concludes the task. Now, why isn't humility a mitzvah? The pasuk says, "V'ram levavecha v'shechachta es Hashem Elokecha," lest your heart grow haughty and you forget Hashem your God. The Torah repeatedly warns against pride and extols humility. Nevertheless, this precept is not counted as one of the 613 commandments. Why isn't it a mitzvah to be humble? The answer is, if humility were a mitzvah, the ego of man would count it among its achievements, says the Baal Shem Tov. Now, insufficient merits of the nation. So the pasuk says, "Al tomar bilvavecha," don't say in your heart, "It's because of my righteousness," etc. Rashi says on this pasuk, your victory in battle will be due to the wickedness of the Canaanites, combined with the merit of the Avos, the patriarchs, the forefathers. Your own merit, however, is not enough to make an impact due to your behavior towards God in the Midbar, which wasn't exactly exemplary. The righteousness of the entire nation, as well as the individuals within it, are vital to blessings and success. Now, awe, or fear of God, and the difference between Moshe and the rest of us. So, Ma HaShem Elokecha sho'el mi'imach, ki im liyira es HaShem Elokecha. What does Hashem your God ask of you except to fear him? Yira Shemayim is the fear of God, which is from the same root as lirot, to see. So the definition of Yira Shemayim, the fear of heaven, isn't merely fear of being punished. Rather, it is a deep awareness of Hashem's presence at all times, more accurately described as awe. Hence the word yira, meaning awe or fear, is the same root as the word lirot, meaning to see. So when we clearly see and thereby feel the presence of Hashem at all times, we develop a constant awareness of his presence, and consequently, God willing, we won't come to sin. This constant awareness that we are living in God's presence might have been easy for Moshe, but how could he assume that it would be easy for the rest of us? The answer is that indeed every Jew contains within him a spark of Moshe. When we reveal our inner Moshe, the awe or fear of God does indeed become relatively easy to attain, even for ourselves. The Moshe within us is thus our inborn ability to reach profound levels of divine consciousness. Possessing this inner spark enables us all to contemplate and meditate upon God's presence within the world and his being absolutely beyond the world, and thereby awaken ourselves to a profound awareness of his presence. Even if we may not be able to sustain this awareness constantly, the depth of its impression upon us when we contemplate it profoundly makes it relatively simple to reawaken this awareness at any time. Now, loving a convert. This is a special mitzvah. The pasuk says, "V'ahavtem es hager," and you shall love the convert or stranger. So converts are especially dear to Hashem because they have voluntarily accepted on themselves the yoke of heaven and of Torah. The Sefer HaChinuch broadens the command to include all strangers, for example, newcomers to a community or a congregation or a school or a business, etc. Pasuk says, Ki gerim hayisem, because you also were strangers in Egypt. So God demonstrated his intolerance for ill treatment of strangers by his actions against the Egyptians after their persecution of the Jews. We need to learn from this, hence the mitzvah to love a convert or a stranger. Now the second paragraph of the Shema, Ula'avta b'kol levavchem, and to serve him with all your heart. What does it mean? With all your heart? This means prayer. Our reading of the Shema twice a day affirms the following two core aspects of our belief. One is that the world of mitzvahs is mandated by HaShem. We do not have the discretion to choose our own mitzvahs or deny them. We are obligated to do them whether we understand their meaning or not. The second core belief, expressed in the second part of Kriya Shema, is that all of those mitzvahs that are mandated by HaShem and done as such are activities that bring good to the world. They are not whims, nor are they meaningless commandments. Rather, they are the core of what nourishes the world. And we must believe that when we do what is good and right, the world blossoms, while refraining from doing so, or worse, doing things that are bad or evil, literally destroys the world. And it will be if you love God with all your heart and with all your soul. This verse seems to repeat a similar verse in the previous section of the Torah, but in that verse we are told to love God with all your heart, with all your might, with all your soul, and with all your might. Apparently there are two levels of intensity in loving God. One that includes with all your might, in other words, constantly rising above what we consider to be rational or even possible, and one that does not. So what is the difference? This is because we are not all the same. Some of us can maintain a constant awareness of God's presence in our lives that inspires us to love him with all our might, while some of us cannot maintain this awareness constantly. Nonetheless, even those of us who can serve God only with all our heart and all our soul on an ongoing basis can still rise to serve him with all your might occasionally. In the Messianic future, we will all be able to sustain this high level of divine awareness. It is for this reason that both versions of our love of God, have been included in the text of our daily prayers. Now, treatment of animals. The Pasuk says, I will give grass in your fields for your livestock, that you may eat and be full. We learn from this a person is forbidden to eat before he feeds his animals. For it is written, I will give grass in your fields for your livestock, and only after that it's written that you may eat and be full. That's from the Gemara in Brachos. Now the danger of affluence. V'achalta v'zvata hishamru lachem, and you will eat and be satisfied. Beware. There is a great danger to prosperity. The temptations of wealth are hard to resist. Affluence often leads to overindulging in pleasures and luxuries, and can easily lead us to forget that the source of all our success and pleasure is the Almighty. This ultimately can lead to ruin. Thus, the sages tell us it's more difficult for a wealthy person to serve God properly and fittingly than a poor person. Evidence for the resurrection of the dead. As we know, every single word in the Torah is important and vital and cannot be left out. It's stated there for a reason. So the Pasuk says, Asher nishba HaShem la'avosechem loses lahem, meaning which God swore to the forefathers to give them, as opposed to give you. Now the promise that was made was not to the generation of the desert, whom Moshe was speaking to, that they should get the land, obtain the land, but rather it was to the Avos, the forefathers themselves, that they would inherit the land. The only way this is possible is that the Avos, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, will themselves be resurrected, so that they can be given the gift of the land themselves. Now, cleaving to God. The Pasuk says, Uladavka bo, and cleave to him. Is it possible to cleave to him? Isn't God described as a consuming fire? But the meaning of the commandment is this: cleave to the students and sages of Torah, and it shall be considered as if you cleave to him. Now, lifnim mishuras hadin, which means going beyond the letter of the law. Birkas Hamazon, the blessing after meals, or the grace, is derived from the pasuk V'achalta v'savata uvarachta es HaShem, and you shall eat and be satisfied, and you will bless HaShem. God commanded us to recite grace after meals only if we were sated, but the sages extended it to even where we ate an olive-sized piece of bread. This demonstrates the attitude of the sages to do more even than what God strictly asks of us when it results in praising him. And that is the end of Parsha Eikev, and next week we will continue with Parsha Re'eh. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great week. All the best. Shalom.